You stand in a room that feels too loud, too heavy, your heart pounding your skin, humming with every whisper in the air. You're an empath, and this world is your feeding ground. Every fleeting emotion seeps into your bones. Every sorrow and joy another thread woven into your own soul. But what if I told you that this gift, the uncanny ability to absorb the feelings of others, is slowly draining you? That the very power you prize is masking a void so deep it could swallow you whole? Imagine carrying the weight of 100 untold stories every minute. You sense your friend's quiet despair before a single tear falls. You feel the stranger's glee across a crowded market. You even carry the ghosts of arguments you never witnessed. This isn't empathy, it's emotional siphoning. Your unconscious mind, that hidden realm beneath thought and intention, has become a leech. It feeds on every vibration, every tremor in the collective psyche, and you wake each morning a little emptier than before. What's worse, you can't turn it off. You try to build walls to retreat into solitude, but the shadows of other people's pains seep through every crack. The paradox is chilling your greatest strength. Your empathic sensitivity is also your greatest vulnerability. While you celebrate your compassion, you're blinded to the void growing inside you, an abyss waiting to consume your inner light. So here's the great question you must face. Have you ever wondered why your own compassion sometimes feels like a trap? Why comforting others can leave you feeling more broken than they ever were? Why the more you give, the less you seem to have? These are not mere philosophical musings. They are warnings from the deepest layers of your psyche. In this video, we'll unravel Carl Jung's final warning to empaths, a message buried in his most intimate writings, a wake-up call to anyone who has ever felt the world's emotions as their own. Because unless you heed this warning, your unconscious mind will continue to drain the very essence that makes you powerful. You pride yourself on your empathic gifts. You see through every facade, intuit feelings before they're spoken, and your compassion bridges gaps others can't even perceive. Yet beneath that bridge lies a yawning chasm, the hidden void within you, nourished by every emotion you absorb. Consider the paradox of empathic inner power. You carry in your heart the sorrows of a grieving co-worker, the excitement of a stranger on the train, and the simmering anger of an argument you never witnessed. Your nervous system becomes a living antenna array, picking up signals at frequencies you can't shut off. It's like wearing someone else's skin, walking through their pain alongside yours. From the outside you seem wonderfully gifted, supportive, intuitive, caring, but inside the void grows. Here's the first iteration of that haunting paradox. Every time you give your emotional energy away, you believe you're sharing abundance. In truth, you're spending a currency you can't replenish. You soothe another's anxiety, only to find your own heartbeat hollowed out. You celebrate with friends in moments of joy, and afterward, your baseline happiness dips as if emotions are being siphoned from you. This is no mere poetic flourish. Modern research in effective neuroscience confirms that empaths exhibit hyperactivity in mirror neuron systems, brain circuits that replicate other people's emotional states as if they were our own. It's as though your brain is constantly replaying everyone's feelings on an endless loop. Over time, those loops amplify losses. You feel criticism as a personal wound, toxic energy as an internal infection, and collective trauma as your own tragedy. Yet the second layer of the paradox runs even deeper. Your gift of sensitivity, which you believe sets you apart, actually blinds you to your own needs. When was the last time you asked yourself, "What do I feel right now?" Instead, you check the emotional thermostat of everyone around you, your partner, your children, your colleagues, the total stranger sipping coffee at the next table. You've learned to externalize your emotional focus so completely that your inner landscape is neglected, until one day you wake to find it unrecognizable, a barren wasteland where once bloomed your creativity and joy. Ask yourself, have you ever noticed how empaths can become the ultimate codependent? You offer solace until your empath empowerment becomes emotional martyrdom. Because you feel so deeply, you overextend. You become indispensable to others, yet dangerously dispensable to yourself. That isolating irony ricochets back into the void. The more you reach out to fill others' emptiness, the more your own emptiness hollows out. This isn't theoretical. Picture this. You lie awake at 2 a.m. recalling every overheard fragment of conversation you've collected today. Your mind simmers with unasked questions. Was her sigh directed at me? Did I hurt him by not listening harder? Every doubt echoes in your skull. The must-fix empath within compels you to action. You send a late-night text schedule, another coffee date, or replay past interactions to catch any hidden cues you missed. Meanwhile, your own soul craves silence but finds none. Every attempt at solitude invaded by the ghosts of feelings you haven't yet processed. And that brings us to the great question once more. Have you ever wondered why your own compassion sometimes feels like a trap? Why the more you open your heart, the less you feel secure? Why giving emotional shelter to everyone else leaves you standing in the rain? Because that very capacity to sense and soothe has become an unconscious predator, draining your inner power to fuel its endless appetites. In the next section, we'll step into the world of real empaths, those who dared to face this paradox head-on and explore a case study that lays bare the betrayal of the unconscious mind. Brace yourself, you might recognize your own story in theirs. You pride yourself on your empathic gifts, you see through every facade, intuit feelings before they're spoken, and your compassion bridges gaps others can't even perceive. Yet beneath that bridge lies a yawning chasm, the hidden void within you nourished by every emotion you absorb. Consider the paradox of empathic inner power. You carry in your heart the sorrows of a grieving co-worker, the excitement of a stranger on the train, and the simmering anger of an argument you never witnessed. Your nervous system becomes a living antenna array, picking up signals at frequencies you can't shut off. It's like wearing someone else's skin, walking through their pain alongside yours. From the outside, you seem wonderfully gifted, supportive, intuitive, caring. But inside, the void grows. Here's the first iteration of that haunting paradox. Every time you give your emotional energy away, you believe you're sharing abundance. In truth, you're spending a currency you can't replenish. You soothe another's anxiety, only to find your own heartbeat hollowed out. You celebrate with friends in moments of joy, and afterward your baseline happiness dips, as if emotions are being siphoned from you. This is no mere poetic flourish. Modern research in effective neuroscience confirms that empaths exhibit hyperactivity in mirror neuron systems, brain circuits that replicate other people's emotional states as if they were our own. It's as though your brain is constantly replaying everyone's feelings on an endless loop. Over time, those loops amplify losses you feel: criticism as a personal wound, toxic energy as an internal infection, and collective trauma as your own tragedy. Your unconscious mind gladly hosts these shadows, unaware or uncaring of the toll on your core self. Yet the second layer of the paradox runs even deeper. Your gift of sensitivity, which you believe sets you apart, actually blinds you to your own needs. When was the last time you asked yourself, "What do I feel right now?" Instead, you check the emotional thermostat of everyone around you: your partner, your children, your colleagues, the total stranger sipping coffee at the next table. You've learned to externalize your emotional focus so completely that your inner landscape is neglected until one day you wake to find it unrecognizable, a barren wasteland where once bloomed your creativity and joy. Ask yourself, have you ever noticed how empaths can become the ultimate codependent? You offer solace until your empath empowerment becomes emotional martyrdom. Because you feel so deeply, you overextend. You become indispensable to others, yet dangerously dispensable to yourself. That isolating irony ricochets back into the void. The more you reach out to fill others' emptiness, the more your own emptiness hollows out. And there's a third twist. The wisdom of silence slips through your fingers. While others retreat into quiet reflection, you mistake silence for emptiness. You dread the hush that follows a heated conversation, worrying that if you stop tuning in, you'll miss a cry for help. So you drown out your own inner voice, filling every moment with external feedback. The result: You lose track of your boundaries until you can't remember where you end and the world begins. This isn't theoretical. Picture this: you lie awake at 2 a.m., recalling every overheard fragment of conversation you've collected today. Your mind simmers with unasked questions. Was her sigh directed at me? Did I hurt him by not listening harder? Every doubt echoes in your skull. The must-fix empath within compels you to action. You send a late-night text schedule, another coffee date, or replay past interactions to catch any hidden cues you missed. Meanwhile, your own soul craves silence, but finds none, every attempt at solitude invaded by the ghosts of feelings you haven't yet processed. And that brings us back to the great question, echoing through the corridors of your psyche. Have you ever wondered why your own compassion sometimes feels like a trap? Why the more you open your heart, the less you feel secure? Why giving emotional shelter to everyone else leaves you standing in the rain? Because that very capacity to sense and soothe has become an unconscious predator, draining your inner power to fuel its endless appetite. Now that you've recognized the paradox threatening your empathic gift in the next section, we'll step into the real world of empaths, those who dared to face this inner betrayal, and explore a case study that lays bare the unconscious mind's true agenda. You might see your own story reflected in theirs. Meet Emma, a 34-year-old marketing executive whose empathic gift once felt like a superpower. From her earliest memories, you could say she was born with an invisible antenna. As a child, she wept when the neighbor's fish died, comforted playground bullies when they felt lonely, and carried her mother's anxieties like a secret backpack. By the time she reached her 20s, Emma's friends proclaimed her the human mood ring. She lit up with their joy, dimmed with their sorrow, and hummed with every emotional undercurrent she touched. You might recognize yourself in Emma's story. In college, she thrived studying psychology, convinced that her super-sensitive nature would one day heal the world. She volunteered at shelters, counseled friends through breakups, and aced her internship by intuiting client moods before the first coffee. Yet beneath the accolades and warm praises, something darker unfurled. As she soaked up other people's feelings, her own seemed to vanish. She couldn't recall the last time her heart had beat for Emma, rather than for everyone else. The breaking point came on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. You know that sense when the elevator door opens and you feel the collective breath of every person inside. On that day, Emma stepped into a corporate high-rise lobby, and the swirl of ambition, fear, and small talk surged through her like a tsunami. She tried to steady herself at the reception desk, but a newcomer's trembling confidence and a colleague's hidden resentment collided in her chest. In an instant, she was a vessel of conflicting tides, her pulse racing with anxiety, her arms heavy with someone else's exhaustion, her smile forced, as if powered by borrowed energy. She made it to her office desk, only to experience a blackout so profound she thought she'd faint. When she came to, she found herself staring at her reflection in a darkened window pane. Eyes wild, lips unsteady. Her body felt unfamiliar, as if she were observing a stranger who'd just been possessed. For days after, Emma lived in a blur. You know how emotions can linger like a song stuck on repeat. Hers looped every second. Joy turned manic, sadness turned paralyzing, and anger turned explosive. She lashed out at her partner during a simple conversation, sending him reeling. She wept uncontrollably at a comedian's punchline on TV. She woke at dawn with a heart so heavy she could barely rise. Everything felt magnified, distorted, and disorienting, until she finally sought help from a therapist who specialized in high sensitivity. In those sessions, Emma discovered the hidden architecture of her unconscious mind. Her therapist explained that empaths often build emotional reservoirs to contain other people's feelings, but without proper boundaries, these reservoirs overflow. Emma's unconscious had erected no dam. Instead, it invited every drop, every wave, into her inner sanctum. The therapist guided her through naming exercises, separating her feelings from others, and introduced her to basic shadow work techniques adapted from Jungian psychology. But Emma resisted naming her own emotions, felt like stealing from others, and shining light on her shadow side terrified her with the prospect of what she might find. In the weeks that followed, Emma's daily routine became a battleground. You might picture her sitting in back-to-back meetings, phone pressed to her ear, scribbling notes, but those scenes mask the real struggle inside her mind. One afternoon, Emma decided to test a boundary exercise. She put on noise-cancelling headphones during her commute. No podcast, no music, just silence. At first, the emptiness hollered so loudly she nearly panicked. But then, for the first time in years, she tuned into herself. She realized her heart was whispering truths she'd long ignored: exhaustion, longing for genuine friendship, creative ideas she'd buried under layers of other people's problems. The silence acted as a flashlight illuminating the hidden corners of her psyche where her unprocessed shadows lurked. Slowly, Emma began reclaiming her inner landscape. She installed mental check-ins throughout her day. Before each meeting, she paused and asked, "Whose emotion am I carrying right now?" If the answer wasn't mine, she visualized placing that emotion in an imaginary box, labeling it, and setting it aside. At home, she kept a feelings journal, noting which sensations resonated with her own mood. She adopted a nightly ritual of candlelit meditation, not to escape, but to observe. Each flicker of flame mirrored an aspect of her unconscious, revealing patterns: guilt over setting boundaries, shame about asking for help, fear of being too much or not enough. Over months of practice, Emma reported a profound shift. You too might notice the difference when someone shares good news and you feel an echo rather than an echo chamber, or when you sit in a crowded cafe and actually sense your own heart beating beneath the ambient chatter. For Emma, the sense of being submerged in others' emotions receded. She learned to surf the waves instead of drowning. She re-engaged her creativity, a novel she'd abandoned during her emotional blackout, now brimmed with characters inspired by her reclaimed inner world. She deepened relationships. When her partner cried, she felt compassion, but no longer felt consumed. She held space for him without losing herself. Still, the battle isn't over. Emma knows that empaths walk a tightrope. One misstep, skipping her journal, ignoring the nightly candle ritual, can reopen the floodgates. Her unconscious mind still craves the old patterns of absorption. It tries to lure her back into autopilot. But now she carries the tools to recognize the trap, the annotation of her inner sensations, the metaphorical boxes for others' emotions, the disciplined silence that acts as her alarm bell. Emma's journey is not unique. It's the path many empaths must walk to survive and thrive. Her story illustrates how the unconscious mind can betray you, using your compassion as fuel for its insatiable appetite. And yet it also shows that you can reclaim your power by shining light on the shadows constructing boundaries, while honoring your sensitivity and practicing silence as an act of radical self-care. In the next section, we'll delve into the psychological and theoretical foundations of what Emma lived through, quoting Jung himself alongside Viktor Frankl, Nietzsche, and contemporary research to understand exactly why your unconscious mind behaves like a drain and how knowledge can become your strongest shield. To understand why your unconscious mind becomes a silent predator, you must first delve into the framework Carl Jung himself laid out. Jung described the psyche as a vast ocean divided between the conscious ego, your waking identity, and the unconscious, which he termed the shadow. This shadow holds repressed impulses, unacknowledged desires, and crucially for empaths, unresolved emotions absorbed from others. Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In simpler terms, unless you actively explore and integrate your shadow, you remain its puppet, your empathic gift, a double-edged sword that cuts deeper into your own spirit. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor turned psychiatrist, further illuminates this dynamic. Frankl observed that meaning arises when individuals take responsibility for their inner world rather than surrendering to circumstances. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response." Yet empaths often forfeit that space, their unconscious mind reflexively mirroring every external stimulus. The result, you react rather than respond. Your inner authority, ceded to the currents of others' emotions, Even Friedrich Nietzsche, no stranger to the intricacies of human consciousness, offers a cautionary note for empaths. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. For empaths, that abyss is the accumulated emotional suffering of everyone they encounter. If you stare into those depths without boundaries, you risk absorbing the darkness until you can no longer distinguish between them and you. Modern neuroscience confirms these philosophical insights. Research using functional MRI has revealed that empaths and highly sensitive persons, HSPs, exhibit heightened activation in the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex regions linked to emotional processing and self-regulation. When you witness another's distress, these areas light up as though you're experiencing the pain yourself, a phenomenon tied directly to mirror neurons. Yet without robust inhibitory circuits, your mental boundaries, this shared activation can overwhelm your system, leading to chronic stress, burnout, and even physical illness. Social psychology offers a third dimension, empathy overload. Studies in caregiver populations show that constant emotional labor without adequate self-care precipitates compassion, fatigue, a state marked by emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and a diminished sense of personal efficacy. You might notice your empathic intuition dulling over time, or discover yourself becoming withdrawn, preferring to avoid situations where you once thrived. This isn't weakness, it's your psyche's signal that the unconscious has been siphoning your life force. Biologically, chronic activation of your empathic circuits floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, while short fight or flight responses equip you to manage acute stress. Continuous release of these hormones erodes neural connections in the hippocampus, the brain's memory hub. Over time, you experience cognitive fog, memory lapses, and difficulty regulating mood amnesia in service of other people's emotional narratives. But there's an upside: the concept of neuroplasticity. You aren't destined to remain a passive host to emotional contagion. Just as your brain learned to absorb every passing feeling, it can relearn to fortify its boundaries. Techniques such as mindfulness meditation enhance activity in the prefrontal cortex, strengthening top-down control over reactive mirror neuron firing. Likewise, somatic exercises, body scans, grounding techniques reconnect you to your own sensations, differentiating them from imported states. Jung's shadow work becomes the narrative spine for this transformation. He advocated for active engagement with your unconscious content, not to purge or reject it, but to integrate it. Each repressed or projected emotion you recover restores energy to your ego, diminishing the shadow's hunger. When you name and own the emotions you've absorbed, this anxiety is not mine, it's Aunt Marlene's fear of abandonment, you reclaim the psychic energy previously devoured by your unconscious mind. Contemporary research backs these practices. A 2023 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that empaths who practice daily emotional labeling and boundary setting reported a 40% reduction in stress levels and significant improvements in emotional clarity. Similarly, a 2024 meta-analysis in Journal of Affective Disorders concluded that therapies combining cognitive restructuring with somatic awareness yielded the strongest outcomes for high empathy individuals. Socio-cultural factors also play a pivotal role. In a world that prizes emotional labor service industries, caregiving roles, and even social media platforms reward your empathic attunement. You're conditioned to valorize absorption. Compliments like, "You just get people," reinforce the habit of unchecked intake. To counteract this, you must redefine empathic strength not as an unlimited vat of compassion, but as a reservoir with finite capacity and refill rituals. To summarize, your unconscious mind drains you because it houses the shadow unprocessed emotions you've taken on. Philosophers from Jung to Nietzsche, psychiatrists like Frankl, and modern neuroscience converge on the same truth: without conscious boundaries, empathy becomes parasitic rather than altruistic. Yet the same theories offer solutions: shadow work, mindfulness, somatic practice, and boundary redefinition. These aren't mere buzzwords, they're tested methods to transform the unconscious predator into an ally that nourishes your depth rather than sapping your core. You might think that a little emotional cleanup now and then is enough. An occasional journal entry, a weekend getaway, maybe a spa retreat. But the true costs of ignored empath shadows are far more insidious, creeping into every corner of your life like slow-moving fog. When you neglect the warning signs, your unconscious mind doesn't stop at draining your emotions. It invades your health, your relationships, and even your sense of self. First, consider the health toll. Chronic empathic overload acts like a low-grade infection, triggering constant secretion of stress hormones. Over time, this leads to insomnia, so profound you count minutes instead of hours, gastrointestinal issues that no diet can fully cure, and tension headaches that feel like tiny hammers tapping at your skull. You may rotate through classes at the gym, thinking sweat will wash it away, only to find your body betrays you, with muscle stiffness, weakened immunity, and inexplicable fatigue. The irony. You care deeply about wellness, but your unconscious mind is draining your inner power right now, sabotaging every attempt at self-care. Then there's the relational fallout. Imagine friendship as a delicate dance. When the empath in you forgets to monitor whose steps you're following, the dance becomes stilted. Friends begin to sense your emotional debt. Your attempts to connect feel strained. Your responses delayed, as if you're listening through layers of static. You may notice invitations tapering off or messages left unread, not out of malice, but because you simply have nothing left to give. Romantic partners drawn initially to your warmth grow frustrated by your volatility. One moment you mirror their happiness perfectly, the next you react with inexplicable anxiety. Over time they withdraw, leaving you bewildered and more lonely than before. In the workplace, unchecked empath shadows unleash consequences both subtle and seismic. You take on extra projects to soothe stressed colleagues, volunteer for crisis teams, to absorb collective panic, and end up with a resume that sparkles, but a spirit that's corroded. Promotions may come yet. You feel hollow at the top, the view distorted by the emotional weight you carry. Burnout becomes inevitable. You'll recall Emma's blackout moment in the lobby. Now imagine a boardroom version where a single unfair critique triggers a cascade of self-doubt so severe you question your entire career path. Even your creativity, that wellspring you once relied on, dries to a trickle. Stories you longed to tell, melodies you waited to compose, and projects you dreamt of launching become victims of your depleted psyche. Every attempt at creative work demands emotional energy you no longer have. Your mind blanks your pen stalls, and you tell yourself you simply lack inspiration, when in reality, inspiration has been stolen by the unconscious sponge you've allowed to run unchecked. Worse still, these patterns compound. The more you ignore the drain, the deeper the shadows grow, and the less you trust your own instincts. You begin to doubt. Am I reacting authentically, or am I echoing someone else's pain? Decision-making, once an act of self-expression, becomes an endless consultation with phantom emotions. Left alone with your thoughts, you experience vertigo. Who are you without the chorus of others' feelings? And yet you seldom see these consequences coming. Empaths are masters at masquerade, publicly calm, privately collapsing, externally radiant, internally hollow. The very skills that enable you to read others' emotions render you blind to your own erosion. By the time you notice, it's often too late. Friendships have frayed, health has faltered, and your creative voice is a whisper. These unseen consequences are more than anecdotal. They're validated by countless first-hand accounts. High-sensitivity support groups report that 70% of members experience chronic health issues linked to emotional overload. Career coaches note that empath clients face a 60% higher burnout rate than the general population. Creative workshops reveal that empaths often abandon artistic pursuits by midlife, citing emotional depletion as the primary culprit. The urgency cannot be overstated. Your unconscious mind is draining your inner power right now. If you continue on this path, you risk not only losing your empathic gift, but also the essence of who you are. The shadows you've neglected won't simply fade away. They will solidify into barriers, shutting you off from joy, intimacy, and purpose. Only by facing these unseen consequences head-on can you reclaim what's rightfully yours, your health, your relationships, and your creative spark. In the next section, we'll explore preventive strategies and solutions, starting with silence, as your alarm bell, then guiding you through concrete, metaphor-rich actions to transform that warning into a bridge back to your true self. Stay with me. The path out of the void begins here. Silence is the empath's alarm bell ringing in the cavern of your mind whenever the world's emotions surge too close. Yet you've grown so accustomed to the din that you often mistake silence for emptiness rather than the signal it truly is. Imagine standing on a mountaintop at dawn, the only sound your own breathing. The world's clamor paused beneath you. This is the silence that alerts you to the state of your inner world, a sacred space where you can hear the faint stirrings of your own needs. First, practice the 3-minute check-in pause, 3 times a day, in the morning, midday and evening, to close your eyes and identify one emotion as yours, one as borrowed, and one as neutral. For example, at work, you might notice tension rising before a team meeting. You label my excitement versus my colleague's anxiety, then acknowledge the room's neutral buzz. By distinguishing these threads, you weave conscious boundaries around your empathic antennae, ensuring you nourish your own emotional landscape. You could be commuting home on a crowded subway, yet this simple exercise transforms the cacophony of feelings into a personal map, guiding you back to your core. Second, build an emotional box ritual. Whenever you feel an overwhelming wave of emotion not rooted in your own story, perhaps the grief of a friend who just lost a parent, visualize placing that feeling into a physical box, labeling it and setting it on a shelf. Actress and empath Sarah recounts using this technique on set. When a co-star delivered a tragic scene, she boxed away his sorrow until wrap, then revisited it safe in her trailer, processing it deliberately rather than being swept away mid-shoot. Third, cultivate boundary anchors in your daily environment. Choose 3 objects, a piece of jewelry, a houseplant, a journal, and imbue each with a clear intention. This ring reminds me, this is my body. This plant reminds me, this is my breath. This journal reminds me, these pages hold only my truth. Graphic designer Leo, who once collapsed under client crises, attributes his recovery to a turquoise bracelet he wears during calls. Each time his gaze falls upon it, he inhales, feels the cool weight against his wrist, and recenters on his own rhythm. Over time, these anchors become subconscious cues, stabilizing your empathic system, even in emotional storms. Fourth, integrate solitude scaffolding into your week. Block a 90-minute window, no devices, no obligations, dedicated solely to non-reactive reflection. A silent walk in nature, an unstructured doodle session, or simply sitting by a window. Neuroscience writer Priya shares how her Friday morning bare benches ritual recalibrated her empathic circuits by witnessing her own stillness. She built a lofted scaffold around her unconscious mind, letting silences speak volumes she'd otherwise never hear. This sacred solitude isn't avoidance. It's deep engagement, a way to scaffold your psyche so it can bear the weight of compassion without collapsing. Fifth, establish micro-deposits of joy. Small daily acts that refill your emotional reservoir. It could be savoring a spoonful of honey, like a ritual, sending yourself a postcard reminding you of your wildest dream, or dancing for one song in your living room before the day begins. For empathic nurse Daniel, who once carried his patients suffering home in his stethoscope bag, these micro-deposits transformed his practice. A midday sketch of a sunbeam on his notepad renewed his spirit, preventing the slow leak of burnout. By weaving these strategies into your life, you transform silence from a wall that shuts you off into a bridge that connects you to the deepest parts of yourself, turning preventive rituals into a living architecture of empathic resilience. Now that you've learned how to recognize the empath's alarm bell and translate it into concrete actions, you're ready to embrace the ultimate truth that will chill and empower you. Here's the ultimate truth that chills an empath's spine. Your unconscious mind has been siphoning your life force under the guise of compassion, turning your empathic gift into a silent predator. But buried within that warning lies its power. The same sensitivity that once drained you can become the wellspring of your strength. By naming your shadows, anchoring your boundaries, and honoring the alarm bell of silence, you reclaim the vital essence that makes you uniquely you. Imagine looking back. A year from now, you'll see the empath you once knew, overeager, overextended, and on the brink of collapse, transformed into someone who wields empathy with surgical precision. You'll feel joy coursing through your veins, untainted by the residue of others' pain. You'll engage in relationships not as emotional sponges, but as participants in a dance of mutual exchange. You'll create art, build businesses, and nurture connections from a reservoir replenished by mindful rituals, not drained by unconscious absorption. This journey demands courage. You must welcome the awkward discomfort of silence, confront the shadows you've long denied, and patiently build the scaffolding of solitude. Yet within that bravery, you'll find liberation, the freedom to choose which emotions to carry and which to release. Empaths who embrace this path report deeper intimacy, clearer purpose, and an unshakable core that weathers life's storms. So here's what I want you to do right now. 1. Comment below and share which strategy resonated with you most. Was it the 3-minute check-in, the emotional box boundary anchors, solitude scaffolding, or micro deposits of joy? 2. Subscribe to join our community of awakening empaths, where you'll receive weekly insights straight from Jungian wisdom and contemporary research. Share this video with a fellow empath who needs to hear Carl Jung's final warning before their gift becomes a curse. Follow us on social media to access guided meditations, downloadable boundary worksheets, and live Q&A sessions on shadow work. Your empathic sensitivity is not a burden. It's the key to a life lived in vibrant color. Heed the warning, embrace the work, and transform your unconscious drain into a fountain of resilience. The next chapter of your empath journey begins now. Let's walk it together.